Alright, hello, welcome. Today we are going to be looking at how to seal natural opal for electroforming. I got a good contact for opal and I decided it was one of the hardest stones probably to cover, and if you cover that one it probably covers just about every other stone. So this is a natural stone that has, so it's not like the cab. If you look at it, it's got all these imperfections in it. And all I've done right now is glue it to a piece of copper for a shank. So natural opal is very sensitive to acid. If the acid gets down into it, it'll start to crumble. Another thing is it can contaminate your bath. There's flash in opal, and for some reason, if the acid gets down into the opal, it actually makes that flash totally disappear. It's probably like one of the most difficult rocks to do. Alright, let's start by separating opal into two different categories. One is transparent and the other one's opaque. Opaque meaning you cannot see through it. Okay, transparent you can. So if it is a transparent opal, you have to do something with the opal so you could still see the shimmer of the opal, and on the back it blocks the light from going through, so you don't see the electroforming conductive ink or paint, whatever you choose to use. So in this case, I definitely use this. I love this stuff right here. Is this color is really universal too. At Sea Level by Easily. What I like about this, it's really universal. It looks natural, but it's still shiny, so it adds a little bit to it. So that's why I like this. The other stuff that I'll be using in this is called the rock top coat. Okay. And lastly, we're going to be using a molding latex. I use Mold Builder. Reason I like this, it lays on top of each other. In other words, like I can keep building layers of latex. That's what this latex is for. Okay, it's got whatever, the properties or whatever the contents of this latex, it really does stack on top of itself quite nicely. It also really attaches itself quite nicely. So, Mold Builder, amazing stuff. And it doesn't have any dyes or inks. You cannot use colored latex with opals. What'll happen is, let's say you had a red latex. Most likely, the red will seep into some of the cracks and crevices in the latex in the opal, and then tint the opal. So you can't use any colored latex on them. Okay. So, if it is transparent, you have to color the back. If it's opaque, you don't have to color the back. So what I'm going to do is, when we attach them to like a ring shank, for example, the best contact is right from copper to the opal. And what I use for that is super glue and baking soda. Okay, that's one of the strongest bonds I've ever found. So it would be nice as if the opaque ones are definitely going to be really sturdy because of that going right up against the copper and adhering right to it. The other thing is, if I attach this one to here, you're actually attaching the nail polish to this, and the nail polish is what's grabbing onto that first initial coat of opal. So yes, the bond is as strong, but not as strong. So you have to kind of think about the copper overlapping this one quite a bit more. So it hooks onto the opal. So anytime I color the back of things, I make sure, just to get the security down pat, is to overpaint them just a little bit so that it's the copper that is adhering this to here. Cool. So first off, we're going to look at this one and how to seal this. So attach any crystal to any piece of metal using baking soda and super glue. I've shown videos on that many times. And then the next step, we're going to be using the rock top coat on a mid layer right here. So let's do that. Alright, so very simple. We do not want to paint all the way up on this. We only want to paint where the copper is going to be. Okay? So we're going to use our imagination here. I'm going to switch over to manual mode, I think. And yeah, there we go. So it's okay if you overpaint this a little bit, because in the end we could remove some of the extra with acetone. Acetone does not hurt opal. In fact, I haven't found acetone to hurt any crystal, and I've done lots of different variations of crystal. Even selenite. And selenite's like kind of a fragile snowflake when it comes down to it. Probably because it evaporates so quickly. It's not like it sits around for very long. So you notice I haven't gap filled it yet. See that area? So I'm not going to gap fill it yet. I'm going to do this step first before I gap fill. And gap filling is taking super glue and baking soda and filling in this gap right here so that it doesn't have an overhang, because you don't want that. It would snag on things. I got quite a few of these, so maybe I'll just do one more just for fun. This one's got a really cool blue opal. Well, you can see it's mainly rock in this area. Remove any of the baking soda that might have been loose. And start painting this rock top coat. Okay, so you kind of get the idea. I'm just going to keep continuing to paint all the way around this and underneath it, and then we're going to let it dry and do some gap filling for it. So once you've coated your rings, one of the things about the rock top coat is it's UV hardening. So it'll harden, and actually it'll harden quite well. You do not need this step, but I do like adding a little bit of UV light to the situation. And I'll do, they got a little timer on the back of here. It's like 15 and 30 minutes. I'll do a 30-minute run on all the rings. I'll just throw them all there in there at the same time and let them cook underneath the UV light for a little bit. Alright, so once that is dry, then we can backfill or blend. So this is Bob Smith's super glue. Basically, I kind of like just hawk this stuff in, really. like that. And then some baking soda. And you got a few seconds to like mold this stuff. So if it gets too thick in some areas, go like that, and then more. And that's how you gap fill this area. I used to use an epoxy putty for that, but I found the epoxy putty to be weak compared to this. And you can layer this. So let's say I need another dose of blending. Stack it again. Now it's even more blended. Okay. You do have to wait a very significant amount of time for that because it's real thick though. So generally like 4 to 6 hours. But the baking soda will definitely harden this glue up to the point where it can even be tooled. Tooled, drilled, ground, sanded. That's a good mark of a material if it can be tooled. Again, if you want to blend, got a few minutes to blend that up. Now wait for that to dry and see how like one side is just a little bit overhanged right here. This is something that is because of the rock itself. I'll probably hit that with a diamond bit just to shave that down. Because once this dries, you can blend it a little bit better with a diamond bit Dremel. Okay, so that's the step you need to take on anything if you're dealing with rough opal. And then after that dries and we tool it, I'll show you the next step. So if you had one that you had to paint the back on, for example, you can just backfill this gap. You don't have to add anything else to it. Alright, now that all the rings are dry, let them sit overnight. This is a toothbrush, and there's some extra baking soda in this. So what I do is generally go like that. And this is a soft toothbrush, so it gets in all the cracks and crevices. And it doesn't hurt the already laid down coating of nail polish. Nice. So, yep. Alright, now we have a separate subcategory. And let's look at that. So in this category, this is smooth on top. Okay? The whole thing is smooth on top. Where this one, not smooth on top. Okay? When they are smooth on top, I have the extra ability to go and put a coat on top of the stone. This comes off later with acetone. So I'm going to go through all these and kind of break them into two different categories: smooth on top, rough on top. And they got some of these that are kind of rough and smooth on top. So you'll have to make a decision on what you want to do on those. Alright, another round in the Easy Bake Oven for 30 minutes as I go make some coffee. Alright, so for this step, you can get a brush that's a long sable. They work pretty good for this. Or we refer to these as an acid brush. They can be found in a hardware store. What I like about these is they got a really harsh bristle. So when you go to pick up something, you can really pound this stuff into the cracks and crevices. Because if you've ever used mold builder or any latex, it's definitely a art form that you're not going to master. So the key here is to overlap by a little bit. I'm going to try this other. Okay, I like the sable better. I don't know. Like, I wanted to try the acid brush, but yeah, I'm just used to the sable. So overlap just by a little bit the paint on the sides, the nail polish. It must overlap. Alright, cool. So you'll need 2 to 3 coats of this stuff, and it takes a long time to dry. That's why this ring right here, these opal rings, these require patience. They do. So once that dries, you put another layer on. Once that dries, you put another layer on. Then you're good to go. Between times, you can wash out your brush just with water. Alright, so this is a mixture of like frit glass, weighted blanket beads, and some crushed up crystal quartz. So it's just got a bunch of little textures. And sometimes I'll take little pieces of wire and throw in here too. Just all kinds of crazy texture. You can kind of see that as I go like this. So if you've seen any of my other videos, it's like a mixture. It's a 50% Mod Podge to graphite, and then a little water in order to get it kind of soupy. Now this is kind of almost too soupy, but this stuff is pretty easy to going. As far as like if I want it to become a little harder, I'll just kind of let this sit out for a couple hours, and it goes back to its congealed state, and it's still good. And if I want it soupy again, I can just add more water to it. It's really kind of a cool. Mod Podge is amazing. There's no doubt about it. It's a resin-based PLA glue that just can't be beat. And if you don't know what Mod Podge is, yeah, it's okay. Here it is. This stuff. Mod Podge. So, I love this, right? This is such a work of art. Wow, look at that. I got a screwdriver. I just had to take a second to kind of look at the landscape. So not all my lab is like this, but when I get into a creative spree, this is what kind of artwork I can produce. Man, awesome. Anyway, this is the stuff I'll be using, and I'll show you how to use it. I'm just going to introduce some texture to a certain area, like right here, where it's not being touched by the human skin. So right here and right here is where I use that version of the Mod Podge conductive paint, which is also a great way of sealing certain areas. Alright, so for this I use a really large sable brush. This is like an inch sable brush. And yeah, I just introduce some of this texture. Oh, this is really thick, and I kind of scoop it from the bottom. And you can almost gap fill with this stuff. And all I'm doing is introducing this to areas where the ring doesn't touch the human skin, because don't do this in any area that it's going to rub up against your knuckle or anywhere else, because it tends to get very sharp. Another area I like to do is kind of like, around the ring aspect. And because that latex is there, you can sort of wipe it off, but be very careful, because the instant this stuff touches latex, that latex will become conductive. So we are going to overlap that, but not with this paint. This is just to add texture to areas that sort of need it. And just let it drip right off the edge, because the texture won't follow, just the runniness of it will. Cool, just let that set to the side. And I'm just going to do that for every ring, is add a little bit of texture. Because that big blob right there, right, I don't know, it's just not very appealing. So I want an underlaying texture that's a little odd, that everybody's like, what is that? And they're like, whoa, that's kind of interesting. And this is how I achieve that this is interesting thing. Cool. So let that dry. Alright, so for the rest of this, I'll use non-textured conductive paint, and I'm going to paint just a little bit over the latex. Okay? So this is where the latex is. I'm painting right on top of the latex. And that's what's going to seal this perfectly. So I'll just basically go around first, make sure I get that seal down before I go painting the underside of this ring. And what's going to make it so that you can get the latex out is you put 2 or 3 coats on there, and when you go to pull off the latex, it pulls it out from underneath the copper. For this blend of conductive paint, it's rather thick. Heavy graphite. So if you do mix your own, you can blend this stuff in different ways. And for rings, I use a heavy graphite. Some stuff like, I don't know, like when I'm doing it on clay or Fimo clay or Sculpey, I use a thinner blend because it doesn't require a primer. But this thicker blend is just heavy graphite, a little bit more of the glue, which is the Mod Podge mixed in with it. A light amount of water. You can't go wrong mixing that stuff. If you do, you have never baked a cake in your life, really. Impossible to screw that stuff up. And if you think that you screwed it up, I do have a video that basically walks you through how to test it. And that's what I'm going to do here, is just paint all these rings with right up against that thing. And if you think that you get this blend wrong, watch some of my other videos on how to make conductive paint, the Mod Podge variation of it. And you can test it out using my video on how to test it with a multimeter. After these are done, I'm going to lower them in the blue juice and let them grow some copper. And into the blue juice they go. So this is a giant tank, and I could do more than 2 rings, but if I want quality rings, what I do is just put 2 rings in a giant tank, and it really does a nice job that way. If you get too many rings, you get a less distribution of copper as far as even amounts on all rings. But if you have 2 in a large tank, you get a nice even distribution. Another thing I do is, especially with rings, is I'll start out at like some ridiculous low amperage. Like, I know there's 2 rings in there and it should be way above, 0.04 amps, but for like almost 2 hours I'll keep it at 0.04 amps, and then I'll raise it just enough until it gets shiny, and then keep it that way. So that's another tip. Alright, well, we're gonna let it cook and let them grow a little bit and see how it goes. Alright, so once it's been in the solution for probably about an hour, I'll gradually increase the amperage. And I'll pick something like 0.2 and then increase from there. And I'll keep continuing to do that until I see a slight shine on both rings, and then leave it at that. Alright, so let's see if I can show you that, so that you can see the shine starting to appear on that ring. One of the things I like to mention about this tank, it's an electroforming tank, not an electroplating tank. So here's an electroplating tank. You can see the liquid here is really light. This one is rather dark. Okay, that means there's almost twice the amount of copper in solution with this tank, and low acid, where this one's high acid, low copper. This one's made for very detailed pieces, like let's say you wanted to do a sculpture and you didn't want the details to be lost. That would be a good tank for you. In this case, I just need a high yield of copper to be deposited on the surface, and I'm not worried about the detail being lost. That's what this tank's all about. And the reason I would choose this over that is because of the acid content of this solution is so low that it's not going to hurt my stones compared to electroplating. So if you're getting down to the point where you're like, should I get an electroplating tank or an electroforming tank? They are 2 different things altogether. And electroforming is a little easier to start with because, yeah, you don't have to worry about your stones getting eaten as bad. So, yeah. Anyway, the shine is there, so I'm going to keep it there at that amperage and just let it grow. This is called low and slow. Alright, there we go. Now, it usually comes out of the bath like this, and what I want to do is just take some tap water and run it underneath the tap water immediately after it comes out of the tank, And then I have a patina here that I kind of have to recharge because it's looking a little pale. And I'm going to patina it with the protection on there. Remember to always leave the protection on, especially with opals. If you're dipping into a harsh base, which that's what this is, it's just as destructive as a high acid to an opal. Okay? So I'm going to warm this up real quick, and I'll be right back. Let's see if I can focus on that. There we go. Cool. So this probably won't change any color, barely, because the sulfur in this has dissipated. I'm going to introduce a little bit more sulfur to it. And you can see that turning like 4 or 5 different shades. I do some crazy stuff with like patinas, I'm sorry, but so I'm going to introduce some stainless steel to the sulfur. And I kind of want a dark variation of this. I don't want too many colors. This is actually going to be for me. So I'm just going to introduce a little bit more sulfur to this. Got a bunch of rings to do, so now's a good time to recharge this. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Alright, sweet. Yes. Nice. So I'm just going to rinse this off. Let's see if I can zoom in on this. Focus on this. There we go. Wow, that is beautiful. It's got a little bit of blues, some reds, some oranges. Gosh, that is epic. Alright, so not to make this like one of those weird reveal things, but let's take a look at how the opal held up. And there it is. Just as beautiful as it was. Now, I might be safe and just rinse this off one last time in like baking soda water, just in case anything got down in there and it's going to seep up. But other than that, it should be good to go because I just dipped it into a real harsh base anyway. So the baking soda is just going to base it out or even it out, because this is like, I want to say maybe an 11 pH, where a copper electroforming bath is like maybe a 1 pH or lower. So I want to bring it even up to about a 7, and that's what baking soda water is it's about a 7 pH. Okay, let's see if I can't focus in on that. Cool. So I wanted to show you the end result after I wiped off the extra nail polish using acetone, and it turned out really good. Just in case you're afraid acetone's going to hurt it. So that is the final product. I'm not sure if I'm an opal dude, but it is a ring that fits me. Alright, here's that other opal. And at this point I would like to plug my online school for electroforming. I have a beginner class and an advanced class for organics. If you're interested in learning more about electroforming, you haven't ever seen electroforming, still have no idea what electroforming is, click the link below and watch the first couple lessons. It'll walk you through how the class works and what's available in that course. And yeah, it's all the same. It's got detailed information just like this one. I didn't water this one down at all. I just wanted to give you, a really good example on the quality that I put into the content. All right. Thank you for reviewing, and have a good one.